Welcome to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
Welcome, everyone, to the Natasha Helfer Podcast, where we go after shame any freaking way we can. A quick note before we begin. I want to let people know that I'm going to be running a one-day Reclaiming Female Sexuality retreat on May 9th in Ogden, Utah, which actually kind of goes along with our theme today. So if you want to treat yourself to a Mother's Day little getaway for a day, or if you want to treat your partner to something like that, I'll link some of the details in the show notes around that. You can also follow me on YouTube at Natasha Helfer, the Sex Mormon Therapist. You can go to my website, natashahelfer.com, to figure out what other events or groups or workshops I'm running. And Symmetry Counseling is my group practice where we offer trauma-informed, sex-positive, and affirming services. So just a little bit about what I'm up to these days, but what is more important is the guests I have joining me today. So I'm super excited to have both Bekah Barton and Danielle. Oh my gosh, why do I not have your last name here?
Danielle Calder, all good.
I know you, Danielle. So let me tell you a little bit about both of them. So Bekah Barton is on a mission to help women reclaim their pleasure, especially those who have left high demand religions. It's something all three of us are very familiar about. We're excited to have a conversation about, where most of us were taught that our bodies and desires were something to either fear or suppress. She is an associate marriage and family therapist with a master's degree here in the Salt Lake City, Utah area. She specializes in sexual issues and is planning on continuing her training down that department, and brings both clinical expertise and deep compassion to her work. She practices at Covenant Sex Therapy and also offers coaching through Everglow Healing. And off the clock, just for some fun things, she's a cook club host, a devoted Swiftie, and a firm believer in the healing power of a really good nap. So
thanks for having me.
I will look at your cookbook. I probably won't cook from it, but
Okay.
My skills only go so far, people.
Yeah.
Okay. Danielle is a licensed clinical social worker and a therapist who specializes in helping people navigate major life transitions, such as religious and faith transitions, relationship challenges, lifestyle shifts, confidence, dating, career, and identity work. She lives in California and is licensed in multiple states. She loves hanging out with her friends, being a fun, warm mom, and having fun. Is also a devoted Swiftie. There we go. All right.
Oh, can I show you, Natasha, as a side note? So I have these Taylor Swift lyrics printed on my wall. What does it look like, right? From far away.
Family proclamation. This is Swiftie proclamation. Is this
these are like Queen, August, and You're on Your Own, Kid. 3 amazing songs. So I had people for weeks looking at it, and then one day someone's like, "That looks like the proclamation." So it's always boxed. I'm like, "This is my new proclamation."
It really does.
Anyways, it just makes me laugh.
Hilarious. Well, I love it. All right, so we've kind of teased a little bit that all of us come more than likely from what we're calling a high demand religion. I think all three of us come from, in particular, the kind of the Mormon tradition, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, although we also have many colleagues in evangelical land and all across the country that are also kind of noticing an uptick in this interest of recovering from purity culture messaging that many of us got regardless of our religious tradition, right? So whether you're Pentecostal or Jehovah's Witness or LDS or Catholic or more Orthodox or conservative Judaism, or, there's just so many similar, I guess, traits to some of the messaging in our, at least Judeo-Christian types of traditions, which is the ones I'm most familiar with. So having said that, why don't I give you both a chance to introduce yourselves a little bit more just outside of your profession and tell me or tell us how were you raised? What brings you to this topic? Why are you interested in this, etc.? Who'd like to go first?
You can lead it, Danielle. I'll give you the floor.
Sounds good. So yes, I was raised in California, in a very devout, believing, sincere LDS household, and I did all the things. I went to BYU, served a mission, got married in the temple, and always knew I wanted to be a therapist since I was 13, but didn't really have a specialty or niche picked out until 2021 happened, and, the LDS church started excommunicating therapists, maybe someone even sitting with us now. And that introduced me to a whole nother side of things I had never yet experienced. My eyes were unfortunately very opened, and I learned a lot of new things about structure, control, patriarchy, just how far the underbelly is of everything. And it was really hard to go through faith transition. I married, had a daughter, my first child, and went to therapy, and there just wasn't a ton out there of support, at least that I was not finding. And so I'm like, this really is very underexplored. For as many therapist experts as there are in books, it's something, to your point, Natasha, that so many different people are dealing with. And I find that deconstructing religion is also very similar from deconstructing political structures. A lot of people are going through these shifts of, this is how I was raised. I was so convinced this thing was true or right or real. Now I see that it's harmful to me and to other people. And it's like a systemic issue, not just I don't want to go to church on Sunday. It's so much deeper. So that's what I specialize in. Yeah. And I've been licensed. I started my therapy practice, Canon Counseling, in 2022. And the rest is history. And then I started Everglow, because we have to be ethical as therapists who also do side projects. So Everglow Healing is everything that's not therapy. Courses, events, coaching, all of that. So I brought on Bekah, who will talk next, because I found that so many of my clients were talking to me about sex, and that's not something that I have a background in, sex therapy. And so I collaborated with Bekah, and it's been really lovely to have her teach me kind of more of that intersection of sexuality, reconstruction, purity culture, all the good things. So that's me.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, did I interrupt you, Natasha? Can you hear me?
I was just saying, okay, Danielle, what about you, Bekah?
Yeah, so I met Danielle on Instagram, maybe like 2018. She used to have the Heavenly Mother page, and I think, like everybody, like deconstruction happens over like years, and so I was kind of in that phase of trying to make things work where I was feeling more aligned, with representing equality of women, and so we started spending time together via Instagram. And then I was raised in Las Vegas. I am from just like a really multicultural background and had a lot of exposure to different religions, but was raised in the Mormon faith, and that was a wonderful experience for me. I loved being raised LDS. My mom passed away when I was a kid, and I really do think that was like a huge anchor of stability for me. And as I got older, it became more tumultuous. And I think I had always had some underlying confusing feelings in my body. And just as I got older, those really started rearing their head. And to just make it functional for me, I had to step back. And that was right around probably a little bit before my graduate program, after my mission. I think the questions definitely came before my mission, but started kind of coming up in that position. And I would say half of my siblings are not religious, half of them are. And so pretty diverse family background. I feel very culturally Mormon. But in graduate school, I started with marriage and family therapy, and we got to start picking extra classes here and there that we wanted to do. And I took a systemic sex class, and I was just like, wow, like this is so connected to my upbringing, and just also being in Utah is very different than being in Las Vegas. And so I started seeing like these patterns that I had never seen. And it's funny because I always remember hearing growing up, like, oh, if you go to Utah, like that makes or breaks you as a Mormon. You either like become super into it or you leave. And I think a big part of that is because you see like the core, like the origin of it. And I think I started seeing a lot of the core, and I just like got really into my sex classes and my sex ed classes and my systemic sex classes and female history and sexuality classes, and it was just really, really fun. And so I loved getting to see that kind of divulge. And then when Danielle reached out to me about doing a course and kind of working more with people, because she had so many people come to her that had questions about sexuality, but she didn't have any classes or education in that realm. And I had been doing my internship at a practice where they specialize in a lot of sexual health issues and relational issues. It was just exciting to start to get working together and get to share maybe some of the information I felt the most passionate about with my graduate degree. So it's been really fun. So I've loved it, and I'm so excited to get to help people. I feel like every time I have a conversation with like a random woman on the street, I'm like, are you okay? And do you feel safe in your body? And so it just like makes me excited that I don't know, that I get to see both of you doing such good work. So it's fun.
Yeah. Okay. So we titled this little interview Reconstructing Sexuality, which is different than deconstructing sexuality. And I think a lot of times we are talking about all the messaging that we want to kind of leave behind, and that would be kind of what we're maybe referring to when we say purity culture. That's one way to refer to that. And usually those messages have a lot to do with fitting into a certain type of culturally appointed box that has a lot of ideas around how you consider yourself a worthy or a good or a righteous or whatever language you want to insert there. Either man or woman, right? And it's especially in more conservative spaces, there really isn't a lot of room for non-binary presentations or asexual presentations or queer presentations, of any sort. And we start finding pretty quickly that this causes a lot of problems for people. And so a lot of the information you'll find out there, both on podcasts and even my podcast, is we've kind of done a lot of work saying, here's the list of messages, and we could do that today here too, but I think we're going to assume that most people have some kind of an idea of what we're talking about when it comes to deconstructing. And what we'd like to spend a little bit more time on today is what does the reconstruction look like? Where do you go once you were like, oh, I don't want to buy into that anymore? Well, what do I want to buy into, right? And what's going to work for me and my body and my preferences, et cetera. So am I setting that up correctly?
Absolutely. Yes. And that's like what I would describe as faith transition 2.0. It's like, okay, yeah. What next, right? And that's like the fun part where like we do all this hard work of dismantling and deconstructing, and now you get to figure out like, who am I now? And I think that's why you do all the work. And it's so hard to go through that, to deconstruct and to realize that maybe the things that you thought were helpful maybe weren't, and unpack that. So I totally agree with you on how you phrased that and couched that.
Yeah, I've noticed with a lot of my patients that they will be like beginning deconstruction or mid deconstruction and be like, all right, let's completely rebuild right now, and want to reconstruct in the middle of it. And I think some of that can be done in tandem, but I definitely feel like people are ready for reconstruction when they're like excited about the reconstruction and it doesn't feel scary anymore. And that's one of the things I ask people to kind of look for when, we're talking about rebuilding our values and our beliefs and our connections to the world and the community, and kind of sensing like what type of reaction does that create in your body? Are we feeling really excited and like this is fun and exploratory, or are we feeling terrified, or a little mix of both? And none of that's bad, but it's a good identifier for where our starting point is with that patient.
Anything you want to add to that, Danielle, as far as when can people know when they're doing one or the other or both?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful distinction. I can speak for myself that when I was deconstructing, it was a 30-hour-a-week job listening to who knows how many podcast episodes and reading things that were so distressing and books, and it was work. Like I was spending, I mean, I think a lot of people can relate who go through this in kind of a more acute way, not less of a slow burn, but like a, oh my gosh, shelf break, right? Like that's what we describe as kind of the breaking point within religion. It was hard. I was angry. I was doing the dishes, listening to Mormon stories, getting angry at the dishes, and I'm like, wow, okay, let's pause. Let's put on the Taylor Swift. Let's take a break. So it felt compelling. Sometimes that felt to me like I was watching a car crash and I couldn't look away. So that was hard. And also guilt. How do I benefit from the system? How do I contribute to this oppression in, religion? And it's just a lot. It's a lot. But at least for me, I eventually got to a place where I was like, okay, well, I'm free of that. Let me play, let me explore. And that was fun. So Reconstruction for me has felt chill, relaxed, lighthearted, optional. So that's always kind of what I address is with people is we want to get this to a place where maybe it's not so distressing all the time, because you can't always be in a state of stress like that. It's not good for you. So yeah, you could go to church, you could explore, or you could not. But it's not like I have to go to every single church. I have to find my new religion. This is on my list. Maybe not. But if it's, ooh, I want to try this out. I want to read this book. I want to go to church here. I want to try this new spirituality. Hopefully it comes from a place of what sparks joy and less of like, let me see what all the lies are that I was told, if that relates to your experience. So yeah, I would say the energy is a big difference, and it's a lot more fun. It's a heck of a lot more fun, at least for me. It's been a blast. So it's about 2 years of faith transition and 3 years of Reconstruction, and it's great to be on the other side of that.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I'm hearing too, maybe in what both of you are saying, is that there's a lot of times when we're in the deconstruction process, anytime you deconstruct any part of your system, which I guess I want to say, just because you're deconstructing purity culture does not necessarily mean you're leaving your religion, right? Mm-hmm. So there's people all over the map as to what their religious affiliation is versus whether or not they're becoming more flexible within that system, right? Which I think maybe flexibility for me is tied to this idea of deconstruction, because you're becoming more flexible in being able to wonder about things like, could I be wrong on this? Could my culture be wrong on this? Are there other ways of thinking about this, that might be more useful or helpful? And what I'm hearing is you're saying Reconstruction, you're not identifying Reconstruction as the hustling for a new system to replace the old one, right? Which I think can be difficult to not want to do. Like, okay, if these are not going to be my beliefs, well, what are going to be my beliefs? And what are my kids? And how am I going to have sex? And who am I going to have sex with? Right. And so kind of that same frenzied maybe energy of I have to have it all figured out, because oftentimes that's the bill of goods we're getting sold in a high demand religion, is that it's all figured out. And so a lot of people are like, well, if I leave this, I need to figure out what now do I now have figured out? And they want that all done very quickly with a bow on top. And I think what you're both saying is that's not the energy we're really talking about when we're talking about Reconstruction.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like when I talk about deconstruction, I'm talking about someone that's in negotiated rebellion, right? Trying to figure out what works for them wherever they are on the spectrum. And when I talk about Reconstruction, it's, does this feel safe? Does this feel fun? Does this feel playful and informative for myself? And yeah, that's two very different energies for sure, at least for me.
Yeah, I think the only place I would push back a little bit is I don't know that it feels 100% safe to go into Reconstruction either.
Totally.
Especially when we don't have tools and, we've never really been taught these things. And so I guess that's the only thing I would say, like make room for some discomfort, or how are we going to define safety or safe enough?
I love that you're pushing back on that. I think when I talk about safety, I think more so, and you know what, this is very layered, so I'm glad that you bring that up. But for me personally, in that deconstruction phase, it was so panicky all the time. And the Reconstruction phase, I felt discomfort and a little nervy, but I wasn't like really sweaty, like really paranoid, really stressed about it. It was just kind of like, I don't know. And I might have bouts of some of that panic, because I think that's normal to just have some of that fear show up every once in a while, but it's way less consistent when I was exploring in a reconstruction phase as opposed to just having even just thoughts in a deconstruction phase.
Yeah, right. Anything you want to say about that, Danielle, as far as safety to try new things we've never tried before, which is going to inherently feel a little bit nerve-wracking?
Yes. I think it's like getting comfortable with not knowing and trying something out and not knowing if it's real. So for example, if it's like prayer, I'm going to learn about prayer and try new things. Like, okay, maybe don't pray for a week. See how that feels. Pray to Heavenly Mother. See how that feels. Say a gratitude ritual. Like do something and just see what happens. Like not being like, oh, if I do this, I'm sinning, or I can't do that, or because I left religion, or because I've deconstructed my beliefs, I can't pray at all. And I'll always remember this. I was watching Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and Khloe Kardashian just decides to whip out a Dear Heavenly Father, and she just straight up prays in this circle when they're doing this photo shoot, right? That's and the whole episode, she's not looking like a Christian. She's not a Christian. I'm just joking. They identify as Christian women, but like they're living their lives, they're showing their lives, they're having so much fun, they're doing their own thing. And to be like, Khloe Kardashian can live her life and do whatever she wants, and she still gets to pray for comfort. Okay, I get to do that too. Like, if I want to do that, I can do that. There are no rules. That's like a part of it, is knowing that, you have flexibility and allowing yourself to try new things out. And also what I love as a Taylor Swift fan, Taylor Swift is not true or real. Her lyrics aren't true, right? They're not literal, but I love them and they make me happy. So maybe I can have spirituality and routines and traditions that are just fun. It doesn't have to be true or right or historical or factual. It can just be like, I like to do a fairy garden party every April and we paint little fairy houses and we make little fairy wreaths and we take pictures in fairy wings. Like, that's not literal. It's not true. It's fun. And that to me is also kind of the space that I like to play in, just to like see what happens. Like, how does that feel to do that? So
yeah, well, I like that you're kind of indirectly tying, exploring sexuality to fun and to play. I mean, I think those are nice words to kind of try to, bring together. Why don't the two of you kind of talk through with me what you see? You've both been through, it sounds like, what you would consider a deconstruction process. It sounds like you've both been through a reconstruction process. You're now developing some coursework to help others around this type of an idea. What are some kind of the basic ingredients of reconstruction? Where do you think people should start in that kind of thinking through that differently than their deconstruction?
Yeah, I can definitely share, but I also definitely want to hear, Bekah, your thoughts.
Definitely. Sorry, I didn't want to talk over you. It looked like you were breathing in. So when it came to my reconstruction, I think a part of it that I don't know, that I leaned into was like doing things a little nerve-wracked and doing things like a little bit uncomfortable and afraid, but where I still felt like, that I was in control, that I could take back my safety if I needed to. And so a lot of that for me started with actively trying to date people outside of that community. And that did bring some discomfort for sure. I remember going on dates with people that had tattoos, and that definitely caused some discomfort. What if I'm, seen in a specific location or place or area, and just like slowly introducing myself to new aspects of community that the wider world typically looks at as like a safe activity or like a very normal thing to participate in. And so I just started like selecting like what looks fun from outside of my community, what looks like something I would enjoy, but I've always had hesitation to because I don't want to be witnessed doing those things, and let me try them and see how I feel about them. So that was kind of my jumping point. And I don't know, it just kind of took off from there, and I was able to find things that I really liked and I really didn't like. I really have like no interest in substances, and that is one thing I figured out pretty quickly. And I just don't like the way alcohol tastes, so I just like couldn't get there. But with sexuality, like I really enjoyed getting to spend time with new people and just participate in activities that I would have never been able to get my mind around maybe 2 years prior. And just, I really think I did that by changing up my environments, because that was a safer point than just jumping into new behaviors that maybe feel a little more scary.
Okay, so I think what I'm hearing there is a few ingredients, right, that I'm picking up from what you're saying. One is to just be curious about kind of what interests you, right? So you're looking around the world and you're like, oh, all these aspects of the world were kind of like no zones, or like I wasn't allowed in these zones. And so I'm going to allow myself, first of all, to cross that boundary line and see what these different zones are about, whether it's a substance zone or a sex toy zone or a dating zone or whatever these zones are. And I'm just going to allow myself to head into those spaces and see what in those spaces might be interesting to me.
Yes, 100%.
And part of that, I guess it's kind of the same, but it's the second ingredient I was thinking of, is that you're willing to allow for influence outside of the culture you came from. So you're willing to meet and date maybe people who are not LDS or not Mormon, or, whatever their identities are. You're willing to step out of the community that you were most comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you did a great job exemplifying that.
Two ingredients that I'm hearing from Bekah. What about you, Danielle? What would you say were some of the ingredients that go into Reconstruction in your mind?
I actually wrote an ebook. I wrote it like 6 months ago. I haven't done anything with it. So I have it pulled up. And this is like my stream of consciousness from what I've experienced, but mostly what I see in my clients. A lot of my patients are like, what do I do now? So the order that I have is like first discussing what is trust, right? Because if you're like me and in the LDS culture, it's this is true, pray for it, know that it's true, you felt good inside, therefore it's true, therefore you have to do this. So if I'm not going to go with that formula, how do I know if what I feel like is right for me is right for me? So part of that I have found is helping people reconnect to their body and their intuition. It's like huge. Kind of to your point, Bekah, like when you do that, how does it feel? Does it feel scary? Does it feel bad? Or does it feel safe? Does it feel okay? Does it feel chill? Like, what is that like for you? Thumbs up. I love these emojis. So we're discussing that and then reconnecting to emotions. I could never figure out who I am without being able to feel angry, happy, sad, scared. And a lot of people just have never really done that before because this is what I'm supposed to do. It doesn't matter how I feel. This is the right thing. This is the wrong thing. So understanding things are subjective. And absolutely not rushing into reconstruction before we deconstruct. So part of that is giving yourself time to grieve, time to be really angry. And what I love to also say is allow stereotypes to be true. I don't know about you, but I did not want to be the angry ex-Mormon. I was cool. I was a good one. I was nice. I still did my visiting teaching and hang out with my ward. And I'm not like them, right? And then it's like, oh, no, the anger's there for a reason. It's okay to have like an anxiety attack if you're asked to pray at Thanksgiving dinner. Like, yeah, these feelings are very valid. So giving it time, and it's not about arriving at, this is my new testimony. It's like, do you need one, right? Like, that's the question. Not like, let me find out what I believe now. So identifying needs, identifying values, trying new things out, and then watching out for perfectionism, and then establishing your new routines. And that's the fun part. So I value friendship. That's a huge value of mine. So what do I do with that? Okay, I'm going to plan a party once a month with my friends. I'm going to include everyone. I'm going to have a theme and we're going to dress up. And that's my version of doing a fireside with the youth. Like, I'm not planning a fireside. I'm not planning like a word activity, but I'm planning a fun party where we're going to dress up like fairies and frolic in the backyard. Like, that's so fun for me. That's so fun. So how can I contribute? And that is just everything to me. And it's freeing. I think that's the biggest thing. And then I love the Netflix. One last thing. There's a Netflix documentary called Surviving Death. And they have 8 episodes. And they go into all forms of spirituality.
Oh, cool.
Mediums, near-death experiences, psychics, reincarnation. They share about different cultures and histories of reincarnation and how these are like ancient beliefs. And it was so, so cool. So I always recommend listening to that one as well.
Just briefly going off of what you were just talking about, I feel like a lot of the stuff that you were chatting about, I feel like encompasses almost like rebuilding internal authority before you get into like, let me go on dates and, you know, sleep with people or whatever. Just rebuilding that internal authority and kind of recognizing like, right, leaders were deciding, doctrine was deciding, community was deciding. And so now like internal authority, like checking in with my body, pausing before committing to throwing a fairy party or going on a date, right? And making decisions that feel really aligned based on the values that you were referencing, Danielle, and not making fear-based decisions on like, how will the leaders or the doctrine or the community feel about this? And I think that that's a good sign for me too, that like rebuilding is happening, that we're moving towards like internal authority.
Yeah, I love that you're starting kind of with this internal authority. Let me see. The words that were resonating for me as far as step one of reconstruction is like values reassessment, right? Trust, building trust within yourself. I think a lot of people who leave high demand religions or are deconstructing, they're like, ooh, those things that I used to trust or were told to trust now have very different meanings. And so I don't even know if I can trust myself. That's something I hear a lot from my clients, right? Is not even sure I know how to trust myself because I bought into this system that ended up not being very trustworthy, but I bought into it, which I think sometimes people don't take into account enough how we all are systemically interwoven. So I think sometimes we take a little bit too much individual responsibility for a system that was created, that was we're all influenced by systems.
So much conditioning there, right?
So nobody gets to escape humanity without having been like influenced by something.
Yeah.
I mean, even Tarzan was influenced by the culture that he was raised in. So it's just like, so I think, yeah, and we do get that big download in Mormonism and other high demand religions that we shouldn't trust ourselves, especially aspects of our sexual selves, right? So if your drives, if your interests, if your kinks, if your fetishes, if your, fantasies are not aligning with, again, the purity culture box, you shouldn't trust those. And so I think now we're asking the reconstruction process, which I think is why it's so hard for people, is that in a way their sexual creativity has already gone through a lobotomy. starting at very young ages, because we're very young when we get these downloads of even simple things like don't touch your own penis or vulva, right? Like, I don't know that any of us necessarily know the first time that happened to us because we're probably 2 or 3 years old, right? When those kinds of messages started coming pretty quickly at us. So now it's like, okay, Natasha or Danielle or Bekah, right? Like I deconstructed. I think that now touching my own body is probably not the worst thing in the world. I kind of have that belief system now. And I've even developed some internal trust, or internal authority. Like I read Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski, right? I listened to the podcast, right? Or whatever. And I even went out and bought myself a vibrator, right? And so that's like a lot of steps towards that reconstruction.
Yeah, I love that. I don't know, that you're kind of building on taking authority back in regards to your own body. And something that I feel like stands out so much to me is like, if you're afraid of your body, you were taught that. Like, you definitely didn't come out of the womb thinking that. And so being able to even just clock that because of a podcast, because of a book, whatever. And I have a lot of LDS patients that have clocked that as well as people that have left religion and things like that. And I think there's definitely something about being from a high demand system where we oscillate between like anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. And when we can get to a space where we're not anxiously attaching to beliefs or avoidant with our own bodies or things like that, we can kind of start consciously noticing, like, am I pursuing this touch because I'm interested in pursuing this touch and seeing how it feels? Or am I pursuing this touch and I feel like comfy cozy afterwards and that was like fun and reflective? Or do I feel like all of this guilt? And we can kind of see, like, are we still in that anxious or avoidant space with ourselves? Which is like a funny way to talk about attachment, like an attachment to yourself. But I don't know, like, I think it's a really beautiful point that you make, that we can get to those spaces and have relief from some of that anxiety.
Yeah. Anything you want to add to that, Danielle?
Yeah, 2 things come to mind. One is a story that I've heard from somebody that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to, something along the lines of, I was dating somebody when I was in purity culture, and we had really good chemistry, and that made me want to have sex. So that was obviously Satan. So I broke up with that person, and then I met somebody who wasn't trying to have sex with me, and we didn't have chemistry, but I thought that that was godly. So I married the person that I don't have great sex with or chemistry with, because chemistry, arousal, was associated with sinning. So I think that's a huge part of that process. What if you did choose to partner with somebody because you were really attracted to them? Is that bad? Is that lustful? Is that selfish? Or is that integrated into healthy mate selection and partner selection? So learning that you can trust your desire and your pleasure. And the other thing I tell my patients is, like, what would be the wrong thing to do? So safety and consent. I believe in safety and consent. So you go and have a one-night stand. Okay. Safety and consent. Okay. You date someone for a year and then decide to have sex with them. Okay. You wait to get married, even if you deconstructed purity culture. Like, these are all options that adults can consent to. But what we're not going to do, right, is like put yourself in a dangerous situation. Or, you decide what those red light stop signs are that would be bad, unethical, illegal, wrong, both objective and subjective. And then everything else you can see is a choice, is something to consider. And there's a big difference between deconstructing purity culture and then going out and doing everything. For example, maybe I'm in a monogamous marriage and I don't ever see myself leaving, and whatever. I'm not ever going to go out and have a one-night stand, but my friend who's single might, and that's okay for her. So just because I might not do it doesn't mean that it doesn't help me to still deconstruct and to destigmatize these things as dangerous, because at least for me, growing up in Mormonism, sex was hell. If you have sex with this person or experience this desire, it's sinning, and then it can keep you from your kids. So it's very interesting to kind of consider those associations. And a lot of them are subconscious. People don't really put that into words. It's really hard to, you have to have a lot of self-awareness and self-compassion to connect those dots. It's very painful to kind of see your life from that angle. And what do you do with that? So there's a lot there.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing from all of that is something that I've been talking about forever, which is we have placed a lot of value on behaviors being healthy or unhealthy, right? So premarital sex, unhealthy. Marital sex, healthy. Anal sex, unhealthy. Oral sex may be healthy depending on whether or not you got a letter in the 1980s or not, right? And, or certain types of dating, what you do. And so instead of looking at any behavior through the lens of sexual health principles, which I'm a big fan of espousing Doug Braun Harvey's 6 sexual health principles, one of them being consent, non-coercion, safety from unwanted pregnancy and STIs, honesty, shared values, and mutual pleasure. Those are the 6 that kind of came out of the World Health Association of Sexual Health Alliance. I forget which one, but one of them, it all had to do with sexual rights. And they came up with these basic sexual health principles, which then, if applied, could apply to a hookup, could apply to monogamous sexuality, could apply to a scene being played out in a dungeon, right? But what was shocking to me as a woman who was raised Mormon and became a sex therapist was realizing, once I was starting to, learn about these foundational principles, how many card-carrying, temple recommend couples, monogamous, most of them hadn't had even sex with another person in their entire lives, were coming through my marriage and therapy office, not being able to really showcase that they have those 6 principles in their marital monogamous life. I'm not talking about people who are cheating or, dealing with infidelity. I'm just talking about regular, they're worthy, they've got the card, they can go to the temple, but they're not following these sexual health principles. So I do think we downloaded the message that marital sex is healthy, non-marital sex is unhealthy. And then to add to that, Danielle, lust is unhealthy, which is just it's a shitty word for chemistry.
Yeah, that's true.
That's so funny.
Sexual chemistry, and all of that gets downloaded as naughty. So we're where I would love to take the rest of our time, if you don't mind, because both of you like are quite a bit younger than me, and both of you, I believe, are currently dating. Am I correct in that? And
I'm partnered, but I have dated quite a bit as a reconstructed person.
Okay. All right. So that's a world that I have less personal experience in. And I also don't have experience being 30 years old or in my 30s in 2026. Right. And so I'm wondering what kinds of themes you are seeing amongst your peers, whether they're in their 20s, maybe 30s. I'm assuming neither one of you are in your 40s. If I'm wrong, well, then just compliment.
An incredible Botox.
I would say I work more with like the women in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. I mean, I do have some emerging adult clients, but what are you noticing, especially from this reconstruction lens? What kinds of things are you wishing, like, oh, I wish you would consider this as you reconstruct, or I wish this, was more aligned with your values? Or are you like, oh, I'm amazed that people are doing this? Like what things are going well out there and what things are maybe not going as well?
I have so many thoughts on this. So from just like people within my own circle and people that come through the practice I work at, I feel like there are so many times where I hear people that are leaving something. They're like, okay, I'm ready to reconstruct. And they jump straight into things that they, I don't know, can cause harm. It just bodily safety. And so something I really like to review with people is like sexual health. So I see a lot of people diving into needing sexual health. Like, how often should I be getting tested? Can I ask people for their STD results? How do I keep my body safe and healthy? In that kind of realm. So we see a lot of physical, like health and safety things going on there. And then as well as like the emotional safety, like how do I date consensually and casually without leading people on, hurting people's feelings because it's non-committal? Because I think a lot of the times when we come from a high demand system, it's I date because we're going to get married. And I've heard from a number of people that they will be sexual with someone in some way, and then these will be two people from high demand religious backgrounds, and the other person will respond by saying something to the effect of like, hey, we're getting married now. And that is just like a huge like flag that will go up. And so being able to start recognizing like, okay, like this doesn't have to be paired with marriage, and it can be this fun and exploratory thing. And it just be really, really enjoyable. I've seen a lot of women be able to enjoy buying their own underwear and it be new and fun and pretty and exciting, and feeling connected to their bodies and outfits and things like that. And I've seen a lot of men come through my office who kind of have to reconstruct after downloading a message of like, I'm an inherently bad person for being sexual naturally, and I'm so much more sexual and so much more XYZ. And a lot of that reconstruction looking like, oh my gosh, like it's okay to have these sexual tendencies, and women or men, if they're queer, also want to be sexual with me, and like seeing that like hope come alive in them and that like piece that like they're not disgusting is one of like the most exciting parts of it for me. It's just being like, you're a good person. It makes me want to cry.
It's life changing.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it's beautiful
for sure. Yeah, it is. It's I don't know if people can even understand how emotionally both like tender and satisfying it is to work on these kinds of journeys with people. But Danielle, how would you have answered my question about what's happening in your cohort?
Yeah, so I am divorced. I have 3 kids. I'm 33. And I was with my former husband for 10 years, married a virgin, etc. That's my background. And now I'm not married anymore. And I live in California. And I'm not in Utah. I don't have as much of that purity culture kind of surrounding me. And so it has been like a putting my money where my mouth is. I didn't ever think I was going to be single. Right? Like you don't get married thinking you're going to get a divorce. I didn't pop out 3 kids just to be a single mom. Like what on earth? Mm-hmm. So it is wild out there. That's kind of my short story long. It's very interesting. And I think right now there is a trend on social media of women disengaging from men. Like the birth rate is at like an all-time low. other countries will, like, the women will strike and will say, we're not having sex with men, we're not having kids, like, we need paid leave, we need to be paid equally, we need so much more in order to have kids. And so I find interesting tension between people like me, burned out girl boss that's also a mom doing everything, and ballerina farm and trad wife culture. And this very interesting dynamic of, like, I want a man who makes money and provides, but is also a feminist. And I want to work, but I don't want to be mommy and daddy. And I think that a lot of the men I see on dating apps that want to provide, have a great job, want kids, are often politically conservative, and that does not align with where I'm at. And so I want this fun combination of liberal and progressive, but still wholesome, because 90% of me is Mormon, right? Like 90% of me is still Mormon. I'm former Mormon. I'm no longer Mormon, but, like, to my bones, I'm like this wholesome, 13-year-old girl that goes to the temple and reads scriptures, but there's this mismatch. And then I have 3 kids, and most people are getting married for the first time. So it's very interesting to be attracted kind of to these, like, Peter Priesthood people. And then it's like, oh yeah, I can't, we don't have the same values. So that's been my experience, and just getting to kind of reconstruct my own boundaries. And before this call, Bekah and I had a meeting, and before that I told her the most wild dating stories, because I have them. I won't share them here, but I have story after story. So it's wild. I mean, I could talk about that for hours, but it's very interesting to be in my 30s and be doing this as a single mom. And do I believe in marriage, right? Like, do I believe in marriage? And do I even want that? And I already had kids, so I don't have this, like, fertility shame that I think a lot of people have. I'm 33, so if I didn't have kids, that would add an element. But I'm like, I had 3. That's a lot for me. That's a lot for me. Mommy's done. Factory's closed. But what do I do now? Right. And then a lot of women, the last thing I'll say too, is a lot of women I see are trying to be lesbians. They do not want to date.
Yeah.
They do not want to date men. They are grossed out.
I think Danielle, Emily, what's Emily's last name? What's her Instagram? Yeah, she posted something recently talking about how she gets a lot of comments about people asking, like, are you gay? And she's married to a man, and she was like, no, but I didn't get to experience sexuality before I got married. And so if I got divorced, would I want to jump into a pool of sharks or a field of fairies? Like, what feels safer? And so, like, obviously I'd want to try women first was kind of her thing. And I think you're right. I see that with women in my office and with my friends, like, very casually in conversation all the time.
Yeah, I think women have had a huge glow up in therapy. Men, there are lots of systemic reasons why men don't go to therapy as much, and women have surpassed men emotionally at an alarming rate among millennials and Gen Z. And they are not satisfied with people who don't know their attachment style and can't use an I feel statement. Women have done decades of therapy at this point, and their people that they're dating have never set foot in a therapist's office. I don't have childhood trauma. What are you talking about? I'm not depressed. And they're incompatible emotionally. And that is an ick, but they're sexually attracted to men. So it's like heterosexuality among this group of women that I interact with. It's like the curse, right? It's kind of like a joke. Like, I'm attracted to women's personalities and their beauty, but, I am sexually attracted to men. So that's an interesting trend. And the saying is, like, a mediocre woman is like a 10 out of 10 guy. Because, like, find me a man that's been to 10 years of therapy, that reads self-help books, that has hobbies, a job, a savings fund, that has a good relationship with their family, like, find me that person that knows their attachment style, that can use I feel statements. And it's just few and far between. So women are choosing a lot of times to be single, or to maybe not date men but hook up with them, but they don't want to be in a relationship. So there's a lot there. I feel like we could talk about that for a long time. But it's very interesting to be very much related and in purity culture, because I have so many friends and family in Utah, but live here, but work in multiple states. So it's very fascinating, but I'll leave it with that.
Well, and as you talk about that, it starts becoming clearer for me why I think for a lot of men, going back to these traditional values, like when I'm looking at, like, I don't know, like the brosphere or the manosphere, whatever you want to call it. And there are, like, some pretty concerning things.
Yeah.
As far as, like, expectations of women, and it sounds like men are having a reaction to this emotional, maybe, I guess, divide that you're noticing in your age groups by saying, well, instead of being like, oh, I guess I better catch up and I better start doing these things. It's kind of like, oh, that's not what I want to do. And they're getting a lot of, I think, validation from other lonely men.
My partner,
I mean, this is kind of hard. I'm the mother of 3 emerging adult sons, so please tell me all.
My partner is male. He's also a therapist, and something that we have talked a ton about, and he did this like long before meeting me, but he stopped participating in a lot of online forums because he was like, the second the algorithm can tell I'm a man, I just get shot at with content about how women owe me these things and XYZ and how to be XYZ about men, and just like a lot of like sexualization of women. And he just was like, I don't want to be associated with that. It wasn't good for him as a person. So he's trained his algorithm. It honestly thinks he's a woman. Like, he will send me female sexual health videos that are from his algorithm and like baking videos, because he has so actively avoided those things. And so I do think a large part of the problem is how much time we spend online. And that's something that I talk with a lot of people dating, that whether it's friends or clients, is like, before you go on dates, get off of screens for a couple hours beforehand, like regulate your dopamine, and also like don't be like watching other people's idealized lives or their expectations and things like that. But it really is one of those emotional safety precautions, because I think you're right. There's this like idealism of, the traditional aspect of what they want, but they don't want to put in the structural work maybe to have a partner that would like to be with them, and maybe they do want to split home, but I've heard this phrase, like, if you want a trad wife, you have to have the finances to literally support someone staying at home to be a house manager for you, and pay to go to therapy for both of you so you can be in a good health space mentally, so that she'll be sexually interested in you, because you're pulling sexual weight and emotional weight, and it's not just like a paycheck, right? I think there's the expectation that like, I go to work, you do these traditional roles to thank me, and that's a huge thing that I see in my practice. I have so many couples in their 30s and in their 40s where it's like, why don't you want to be physical with me? And that's a huge discrepancy that I see amongst couples.
Well, and there's nothing less erotic to either be married to a parent figure or a kind of like a job figure.
Yeah.
In my manager in some way or another, right? And
caretaking.
And I think this is one of the big things that we don't talk about enough, that I think all of us also definitely downloaded, was the economic egalitarianism, that when one person has more earning potential than the other, that has erotic implications. And although that may really work well for people who are going to have babies and toddlers, it really stops working well pretty much post that time frame for folks. And now you're creating kind of an unintentional dependence. And eroticism usually doesn't do well when one person is feeling dependent on the other, or stuck or trapped, versus it's a chosen egalitarianism, right? And egalitarianism is a hard concept because, only half of the population can actually carry and birth a baby, and
totally.
That there's unfairness in that baked in to the equation, right? I don't think a lot of mothers of babies want to be working necessarily 24/7 to, keep their earning potential. They're already working in unpaid labor that our society just expects people to do for free. And so there's a lot of systemic issues here that I can see a younger generation really grappling with these. What do we want? How do we want it? Do we want the same things? Are we sharing power? Are we sharing responsibility? In what ways? And all of that has a sexual component to it, which
all of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I feel like there's something to be said about the fact that at least I feel like I was raised for a world that doesn't exist anymore, with the idea that like the marriage is the construct in which even the poorest man can have a maid is kind of like a theme I hear a lot. And it is just one of those things where, talking about the egalitarianism and the aspect of it where you're talking about, when there's an economic indifference in the home, it does hurt sexuality. And I will send you the citation for this after if you want to post it. But I was reading a paper recently that talked about, on average, women that graduate BYU make about $800 a year. And that is such a big gap, and there's so much dependence on people. And something that I chat about a lot with couples that are kind of reconstructing after things and want to make things more egalitarian is that, like, equality in the home is not, I took out the trash today, so you take it out tomorrow. Oftentimes egalitarian aspects of the home can be like, who has the emotional capacity to do that right now? And if you can tell that your spouse doesn't, or they've communicated that, you picking up that that chore or whatever that needs to be done kind of creates a system where we don't feel like one person's doing more and it's not an equal thing. It's like, I have the space to do this, and so I'm going to do it for you because I love you. And that creates so much more eroticism than being like, well, I did the whiteboard today, and so you do the whiteboard tomorrow,
All right. Any closing thoughts, Danielle, from all of that we just talked about? Or
Yes, I think the last thing, I was chatting this with a friend, is that, and this is a total tangent, but I do want to mention it, is that, like, trad wife culture, I think, is in response to feminist breadwinning women who are so tired of doing both that they'd almost rather exchange their careers for just doing the household, because they're already doing all the household. 50-50 in patriarchy is never 50-50. It's still women doing so much. And so obviously there's so much to talk about trad wife culture and putting women at risk, and how when women make money, they're much more likely to get a divorce. But I just find that a lot of people are trying to be equal, but equal is not equal. Equal is not equal. Equal is I'm pregnant with a baby. I'm not touching the dishes for 9 months. That's equal. Equal is not, I do half, you do half. So I see a lot of couples trying to negotiate. What does that mean to be maybe more progressive, but still have a family? And I will never forget having a fresh C-section and my third baby, and having a C-section scar. My boobs were filled with milk, and handing my baby to my husband at the time to go to work and make money, and had to be driven to work because I couldn't drive because I was so fresh. And I was like, I am upside down. I want to be at home. This girl boss, feminist, aspiring woman wants to be home. Put me in bed. Put me with my baby. You go hunt and gather. I'm tired. So it's very interesting. There's so much there that we could get into. So I just wanted to mention that trad wife component to purity culture and conservative religion.
yeah, thank you, Danielle. Unfortunately, your audio became a little choppy there at the end, so I apologize to the listeners for that. We're going to try to clear that up if we can. But no, I do think this is true. I mean, my grandmother's generation basically said, well, we got fucked over and this wasn't good. And then my mother's generation is like, well, and they're in their 80s now, 70s and 80s. Well, we are, we have our voting rights, and maybe we got some education and we got some jobs, but definitely we're still doing the bulk of the work at home. Then comes my generations, right? Like, we're in our 50s. That research is still there. My generation is still doing the bulk of the work, and we're working, right? So many of us did get earning potential. Some of us are even making more than our husbands or our partners or are single, but we're still doing the bulk of the work as far as childcare, emotional labor, all of that. So I can see that, if you're younger, you're like, well, I don't want to do it all. So I'll just pick one or the other, right? I'll either pick the life where I get the earning potential and I can run my own life and make my own decisions, or I'll pick the family life and let the guy do it all, as far as like the trad wife type of mentality. I think this whole system is broken. I don't think any of these are the answers, right?
Well, and I think that's the thing about Reconstruction is once you deconstruct one system, you have to deconstruct them all. And it's the same with Reconstructions, whether it's religion, sexuality, government, family. It's so intertwined.
Yeah. Well, we're at the end of our time. So tell us a little bit about this. I think you've developed a course. You're welcoming people to find out about it. So I want to give you a little bit of airtime to talk about that, and then we'll call it a day.
Yes. So on Everglow Healing, Bekah and I created a course together about female sexual pleasure and AFAB sexual pleasure. So if you were born with female genitalia, have a female genitalia body, presenting body, this is the course for you to learn about your body, sex ed you never got, to understand purity culture and how it's affecting you, and then to get really practical tips on how to explore with yourself and then to take that with other people. A lot of people are like, I want to have better sex. Tell me what to do, right? And Bekah can speak towards this, but it's really like, let's slow down, let's learn. Let's learn how your body works and what you like, because it's so much about reclaiming it for you, not let me act like a porn star, let me, not to stigmatize that, but it's not about performing for the male gaze. It's how does this feel internally for me, and how can I take that to other people? So the course is so fun. It's on Everglow Healing. Lindsay Houseman made the website. It's so gorgeous. It's like purple. I love it so much. It's been so fun to do this with Bekah. And then I have my Reconstruction course that I mentioned. I'll also put out there. But Bekah, tell us about the course, like how.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. There's a ton of, and I'm happy to re-clarify any of that, Natasha, if we need to, because I know our mic was kind of coming in and out. But there are a ton of exercises in each section that'll take you through kind of reclaiming whether it is feeling comfortable with your anatomy or implementing a partner. We have lots of different nervous system rituals we can take you through to help you kind of center and feel calm for these new activities and adventures you might try. Solo, partnered, group setting, if that is more comfortable for you, whatever feels best and exciting and fun. We've put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's absolutely geared towards women and femme people who have not been given the tools to understand themselves, and that's unfair. And so we're really trying to bring it to the basics and meet you where you're at. We're really excited about that. And I am putting out an ebook on dating after deconstruction as well. And it goes really well and ties in with that. It's also substantially less expensive. So if that's more in your budget, that's an option too. And I think Danielle's Reconstruction thing aligns a little bit more with that as well. So we're really excited. And I'm so glad I've got to come and meet you in person. I've come to so many places that you've spoken at live, and it's just fun to get to meet you. So.
Thank you, Bekah. Okay, so the website we're directing people to, I didn't quite understand, Danielle.
Everglowhealing.com.
Everglowhealing.com. And that's where and is this course going to be in person or live, or is it kind of like a self-paced?
It's a pre-recorded course. We have slides going, and we will be there narrating the whole thing. And the slides are also downloadable, I believe. Is that correct, Danielle? The slides are downloadable?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we'll have a discount code for 50% off in Natasha. So that'll be a good opportunity for anyone that's interested in the course. And I do also want to say, Natasha, that I have just looked up to you for such a long time, and it's so fun to get to meet you. We've seen each other in Utah several times, but thank you for having us on. And I've told Bekah that I feel like you are like the pioneer in this area. Like, there aren't many of us modern Mormon history makers, and you are certainly one of them.
I know. I remember your candlelight vigil. So.
I would like to candlelight vigil.
Yeah. Is that so funny?
I find that piece of paper. I was writing.
I was pissed for you.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you for your bravery and being like a real person. And I love it when you cuss, and I love it when you use specific language. I wouldn't call it vulgar because I don't think it's vulgar, but I love it when you use actual words that mean things that some people might feel uncomfortable with. And every time I've seen you speak or I've been around you, I just always get the sense that like you are a real person. It's not pretentious. It's not performative. You are exactly as you appear. And I really appreciate it. It's nice to have role models because it's hard when you're raised Mormon. All your role models might not really be in your world. So it's fun to get to see you online and in person.
Well, thank you. That was very, very beautiful and kind and unnecessary from both of you. But thank you very much. And I do believe that whoever joined me on that candlelight vigil, we were just sharing a heartthrob of some sort. I think we were all connected with one.
I was there. It was rare. I remember all too well. We're so there. Yes, I love it.
All right. Well, check out Danielle and Bekah. I will have links to where you can find them. Definitely everglowhealing.com. If you all want to send me your like social media handles and stuff. I can put that in the show notes as well. And all three of us are very aligned in this kind of beautiful, profound work of reconstructing this tremendous part of ourselves that, quite frankly, society, religion, family, culture, government does a horrible job, for the most part, global wide. It really messes with very integral sacred parts of ourselves, and it really messes up so many beautiful aspects of what it means to be human. So helping anybody, find those beautiful sacred parts in ways that are enjoyable, sustainable, lovely, and pleasurable for you is, I think, a healing that we are all very interested in. So thank you so much for both of your times today. And we will see you around because
Bye.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Natasha Helfer Podcast. To help keep this podcast going, please consider donating at natashahelfer.com and share this episode. To watch the video of this podcast, you can subscribe to Natasha's channel on YouTube and follow her professional Facebook page at Natasha Helfer, LCMFT, CST-S. You can also find all her cool resources at natashahelfer.com. The information shared on this program is informational and should not be considered therapy. This podcast addresses many topics around mental health and sexuality and may not be suitable for minors. Some topics may elicit a trigger or emotional response, so please care for yourself accordingly. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or feelings of Natasha Helfer or the Natasha Helfer Podcast. We provide a platform for open and diverse discussions, and it is important to recognize that different perspectives may be shared. We encourage our listeners to engage in critical thinking and form their own opinions. The intro and outro music for these episodes is by Otter Creek. Thank you for listening.
There is a place where time slows to nature's pace, and there is space there to find yourself in her embrace. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart. 10,000 years of our human history etched on her canyon walls, alongside Earth's mysteries. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart, to the homeland of the heart. Deep in our cities, we sleep without her stars, yet still her presence sustains us from afar. Some places should be left alone. Now tishki say the Navajo, so we can always go to the homeland of the heart.